Hey guys, this is Nia and today I'm going to be showing you how to paint a watermelon doodle. This is really simple. There are only a few simple steps, but the technique does take a little bit of practice if you're new to watercolors. I'm going to be showing you how to do a wet on wet technique, and this technique is all about timing. So let's just begin by drawing it out first. It's really not much. All you need to do is draw a triangular shape with the bottom slightly curved, or if the watermelon is big, you can also make a straight line. So the curvature depends on the size of the watermelon. And then I'm going to draw a line at the bottom, which is where the white area is, or the rind, and also some seeds. For the seeds, I'm only going to draw a few, maybe 2 to 4 seeds per watermelon, and the seeds I'm going to draw them as teardrop shapes. You can vary this by drawing some bite marks, but if it's too much, then just stick with the triangular shape. It's also going to be fine. Initially, I also added a bigger piece, like half an oval, for a different cut, but I find that it's a bit too big compared to the rest, so I decided to not include that in this one. The colors are also very simple. There are only 4, but you can also simplify it even more and use 3 colors instead, so you can pick either of the red, but I decided to use both. For the doodle, I'm going to use Quin Red. This one is by Daniel Smith, and I'm also going to use Naphthol Red by M. Graham. And for the rind, I'm going to use Permanent Green, and for the seeds, I'm going to use the color Sepia. The green and the sepia is from my Holbein set. I'm going to first show you closely the technique that I'm going to be using to paint this. It's simple, but you have to understand a little bit about how the water and the paint will flow depending on different wetness. I also tried this a few times to get the feeling of it, as I'm not usually one to use much wet on wet technique. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a barrier with water, and I'm going to make it into the shape of the silhouette of the watermelon slice. You can use clean water for this, but sometimes in certain lighting it's a bit hard to see. So here I'm going to be showing you that you can slightly tint the water using one of the colors with only the slightest bit of paint, so the water doesn't look completely clear. Once I've placed down the water, I added a thick consistency of the Quin Red, and I'm going to let the water take the paint from my brush, and I'm going to apply it from the tip of the watermelon slice so the paint travels downwards. Whilst the paint is traveling down, you can also help it flow using your brush. I use the tip of my brush to move it down, and as it reaches close to the bottom, I leave a bit of space for the rind. For the rind, I'm going to use a thick consistency of the permanent green, and I'm going to line it to where the bottom of the watermelon is, but a little bit outside of the wet area, but also still touching. So I want some parts of the brush to be touching both the dry and the wet area, if that makes sense. And I'm going to take that across to the other side. Whenever you take off the brush, you'll create a bloom. That's okay, just keep going till the end, and then you can clean your brush and dry it on tissue. Then take a part of the green that has moved out of place using your clean dry brush, and the clean dry brush should be able to absorb the excess water or the excess paint. I want the wet area to no longer be puddling wet, but closer to being damp, so the water will still bloom out and flow. The drier your paper is, the less paint is going to travel, so while I'm going to add the naphthol red, I'm going to wait for the surface to be at the damp stage. Then I'm going to add a thick consistency of that color and dab my brush in small areas of the watermelon slice. I want the paint to be mostly dry when I paint the seeds, so if I ever want to wait for certain parts to dry, I just move on to the next one. So here I'm just going to demonstrate to you an upside down watermelon slice. I'm going to be using the exact same steps, and I'm going to create a wet area for the barrier so the paint doesn't travel further more than the space that I've created. Then I'm going to take the thick consistency of the quin red and apply it to the tip of the slice, which is now at the bottom compared to the first one, which is at the top. Then using my brush, I'm going to help it along to just spread the paint slowly, but I want the bottom part of the slice to still be lighter than the tip of the slice. As I'm pulling the paint to the rest of the wet surface, I'm using the tip of my brush and I'm still keeping the tip of the watermelon slice darker than the bottom. I want the slice to have quite a large contrast because that is what will create the wet on wet look, which is special to watercolors. Next, I'm going to paint the rind, and I'm going to take a thick consistency of the permanent green again and paint it right at the tip and make my brush touch both the wet and the dry surface. As you can see here where the paint is blooming, I just clean my brush and dry it slightly, and then I use it to absorb some of the green paint. Now I'm going to take the naphthol red again and apply it to some parts of the watermelon slice, but not all. And I'm randomizing this, also leaving a little bit of white space. I'm also not going to further down the slice, so it still has that nice blooming effect. It's up to you if you want to paint the seeds while the surface of the paper is still cold to the touch or completely dry. Here my paper is still slightly cold, which means it's not bone dry yet. And as you can see, while I'm painting the seeds, some of the paint still blooms out and I can't create a clean line. But this just depends on preference. If it's at the stage when the paint dries, it's going to slightly dry blurry instead of having a clean distinction between the colors. Later on, when I paint the final painting, I'm going to paint all of the slices first so I have more time for the paint to completely dry, and you'll be able to see the difference with the seeds. If you're only going to be painting a few and the paper is still wet but you want it to be completely dry before painting the seeds, you may also use a hair dryer to make the drying process quicker. As you can see here, there's a clear line where the paint is dark and where it's drying off. I want to avoid such clean divisions for the gradation. And if you want to make it a little bit more textured, you can take a slightly damp brush that is clean and reactivate some of the paint from the watermelon slice and pull across some of the paint or pick up some paint to randomize the transition a bit more or create a little bit of texture. And after that, I'm just going to add a few seeds on this one too. Now I'm going to paint the final painting following the same steps. I'm also going to paint once with bites taken off from the sides or the tip of the slice and play with the direction and size of the slices. I didn't do a pre-sketch before this, but of course you can plan out the composition first if that is more comfortable for you. I forgot to also mention that as you're pulling the reds down, as you can feel that I have excessive amount towards the bottom where I want to create the lighter gradation, I can fix that the same way as I tried absorbing the excess paint, so I can clean my brush so I don't accidentally put more paint instead, and then dry it with tissue, then pick up the excess with my clean brush. For the second one, I'm going to show you how I paint the ones with the tip bitten off. The steps are basically the same, but this time instead of drawing the triangular shape with the clean or tinted water, I'm going to draw out the silhouette of the bitten watermelon instead. I suggest to draw the lines where the tip is bitten off before the rest, or else sometimes it's too late because you've accidentally created two long lines for the triangle instead, which have happened to me before. And the rest is basically the same. I'm still going to apply the color from the top of the slice and let it flow down or help it along with my brush. For this small one, I painted the wrong direction because I decided to change my mind as I was painting it, so the light part of the gradation is at the wrong spot. To fix this, I'm going to take off as much paint as I can close to the rind area with a clean dry brush. Then I'm going to add more water to further the extension of the rind area so there's a clear space. And because the paint is still wet, I'm going to move the paint around with my brush to get it to the places I want it to go to. And the rest of the steps are basically the same now that this slice is at the right stage as it needs to be. Then I'm just going to add the permanent green for the rind area. I'm also going to add the naphthol red to finish this one off. If you don't have these reds available, you can use a pinkish tone of red and something close to a primary red instead. And if mixing the two is a bit too much to handle at the beginning, you can also use only one type of red. It doesn't even have to be exactly the same as what I'm using. You can just use whatever red is available in your palette and what you feel like suits the color of a watermelon. But I just personally like both the pinkish red and the primary red mingling with each other subtly to create this really nice gradation. I think I'm fairly happy with the slices and the positions now, and I'm pretty sure that they're all completely dry by now except for the one I painted last. So I'm going to take some sepia and paint the seeds. You will be able to see the clean lines that I'm able to create because the surface of the paper is now completely dry. I can even create really thin lines with the tip of my brush compared to when I painted the seeds with the slightly cold to the touch paper. This is just preference. If some of you like the looser look, then the blurry seeds maybe will suit you more. So just try both to see which one you prefer. To paint the seeds, I'm going to create a teardrop shape, and in some parts I'm going to leave a space so not all the surface of the seeds are completely flat colored, just to add a little bit of highlight. So I'm going to show a bit of the red from the bottom layer, but of course this is optional. To finish off, I'm also going to scatter some more seeds around the watermelon slices just for fun. You can create splatters or watermelon juice droplets, just something to add a decorative element to the painting. If you've noticed, I'm painting this on a separate sketchbook, and if you're wondering why, it's because this is the third time I've filmed this. The first time I didn't like how it turned out. I wasn't too happy with the color and the composition, so I started again. But as I was painting the final painting and I was trying to film a different angle, I realized that it wasn't recording. So instead of painting from the beginning, I decided to switch to the sketchbook instead and paint the final painting here instead. It was really frustrating, but luckily this turned out better than the previous ones that I painted anyway, which made me feel a little bit better. Anyway, that's the finished watermelon doodle. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I had lots of fun painting this despite having to film it 3 times. You really do get the hang of it after repeating the same steps a few times, so you get the feeling of how the paint travels and how the paper dries. If you're still here, I'd like to also mention that I've uploaded a new Skillshare class on a more realistic version of this watermelon slice using the same techniques covered here, but just with more colors and layers to add depth and details. This class format is much more casual than my usual format, and the illustration is quite easy compared to what I usually make for my Skillshare class, and the class is also quite short, so if you're looking for a quick realistic painting project, please join in. So if you guys are still here, thank you for sticking till the end. I hope you guys learned something new from this tutorial, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!